In the Appalachian winter, silence is never just silence. The snow covers roads, fences, footprints, but not the missing. Every flurry buries a secret, and some never melt. Tonight, we dig into the coldest corners of the Appalachians. Unsolved vanishings, nameless graves, trails that ended too soon. These aren't just cold cases. They're frozen warnings from a land that never forgets. And every story we tell still leaves one thing behind, a question nobody could answer. They say some winters never end. Just beyond the ghostly quiet of that last snowfall, we arrive at Snowhook Ridge, a narrow pass in West Virginia where time seems to freeze with the wind. In January of 1922, a 14-year-old girl named Elsie Harrow vanished while walking home from a church gathering less than half a mile from her family's cabin. A snowstorm moved in like a drawn curtain. By morning, the path she'd walked was clean. No prints, no trail, no sign of struggle. The only thing the search party found were confused hounds circling the Thame Pine stand, refusing to step past its edge. A week later, when the snow was still waist-deep and the wind moaned through the hollows, a hunter stumbled across something unusual. It was Elsie's bonnet, her Sunday best, frozen to the side of a tall pine tree, not buried in snow but resting neatly on a low branch like someone had placed it there deliberately. There were no tracks, no broken twigs, just that one eerie artifact staring back at the forest. Around the tree's base were carvings, 5 slashes even and shallow, arranged in a circle. The locals argued over what it meant. Some claimed it was an old Appalachian symbol for grief. Others whispered it was a warning. Spring eventually came, but the thaw brought no answers. Elsie's body was never found. Her belongings never surfaced. And in that stretch of ridge where the snow first fell, no birds returned. Locals began avoiding the trail altogether. Hikers spoke of unnatural quiet, the sense of eyes behind trees. Some even reported a child's soft humming drifting on the wind. Snowhook Ridge became more than a place. It became a pause in time, a place where something was taken and never given back. And even now, a century later, no one walks there without looking over their shoulder. Hollow Pike isn't on most maps anymore, but the older locals still know the bend in the trail where the road narrows and the wind feels just a little colder. After the disappearance in Snowhook, whispers drifted east about another cold case that never thawed. In January of 1919, a woodcutter named Elias Darnell stumbled on 2 perfectly dug graves at the edge of his property. Fresh earth, no names, no footprints in or out. He waited 3 days before telling the sheriff. When they returned, the graves were filled. No markers, just snow flattened as if pressed by hands. The ground, when dug, held nothing but packed dirt. No remains, no roots disturbed. Just wrong. Elias moved his family out within the week, claiming the trees were whispering to the soil. Later that winter, a woman in a tattered white dress began appearing at the Pike's frozen crossroads. No one knew her name and she never spoke, just stood at the fork with her veil frozen to her face. A passing minister tried to speak to her, but found only a bouquet of dead thistle where she'd been standing. That spring, Hollow Pike's post office received an envelope addressed simply to her. Inside, 2 pressed birch leaves and a tintype photo of a man and woman, faces scratched out. Some said the woman had once lived up the ridge, jilted by a fiancé who vanished days before their wedding. Others whispered she was mourning not 1 loss, but 2. In 1937, long after Hollow Pike was mostly abandoned, a WPA crew clearing the land for a ranger station unearthed skeleton remains beneath a birch grove. 2 bodies, buried shoulder to shoulder, their skulls facing opposite directions. The coroner reported they were deliberately placed, not hurriedly dumped. One had a ring, The other, a rusted pocket watch with no hands, just a single red thread wound around its gear. The ranger station was never built. The clearing remains untouched, though hunters say their dogs whine near that grove, and some have seen a woman in white standing there just before snowfall. The records were quietly filed away, and the graves sealed again by wind, ice, and silence. In the winter of 1918, a mail courier named Abram Tate set out from Cragstone Valley with a canvas bag of letters and a sled team of 4. Timberline Pass was the only route through the ridge during heavy snow. But it was treacherous, winding through a narrow gorge often sealed off by drifts and icefalls. Locals warned Tate to delay his trip, citing a coming storm, but he insisted on making it through. The next day, a blizzard hit. When the skies cleared 3 days later, searchers found the sled returned, but the dogs were still tied in place, alive and panicked. Abram was gone. No blood, no drag marks, just one set of footprints veering off into the snow, then stopping mid-step, as if he vanished in the middle of a stride. The area around Timberline Pass earned a reputation after that. Hunters spoke of hearing a man's voice calling from the cliffs, sometimes clear as a bell, sometimes just a mumble riding the wind. In 1922, a geologist surveying the slope reported hearing footsteps pacing just beyond the tree line, though no one else was on the ridge that day. He returned alone, and weeks later, he too disappeared, leaving behind only his compass and a journal half buried near a cairn of stones. The last line in the notebook read, "There's someone watching, no waiting." Locals avoided the pass during snowfall after that. Some said it was cursed. Others believed Abram Tate had never left and was calling others to join him. In 1935, almost 2 decades after Tate's disappearance, a letter showed up at the Cragstone post office, postmarked from a mountain village that didn't exist on any map. The envelope was addressed in shaky handwriting to a Mrs. Agnes Tate, Abram's wife. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "I kept walking. I didn't know where else to go. I hope you forgave me." The ink was smeared as if it had been damp, and the stamp bore a strange insignia, what looked like a ridge of mountains crossed by a single broken line. Postal inspectors could never trace its origin. The letter disappeared from the office archives 2 weeks later, and no one claimed to have handled it. Mrs. Tate died shortly after, clutching the envelope in her hands. Some say it was real. Others say the snow brought more than cold with it that year. It brought a voice long thought buried, trying to make its way home. By the time spring returned to Briar Hollow in 1929, it brought more than just melting snow. Hunters following game stumbled on something unnatural in the thawing ground. A half-buried stone chimney sticking out from beneath a hillside thicket. It wasn't on any map, and no local recalled a cabin ever being built there. But beneath the earth, there it was, logs rotted, roof collapsed inward, and a rusted stove still bolted to what remained of the floor. At first, they thought it was an old settler's ruin, until they found the bed frame with a set of boots still beside it. In a metal box under the floorboards, they found something stranger than bones. A ledger. Names, dates, and what appeared to be payments crossed out in red. Most of the entries listed only first names and odd notations. Ada silence. Wells, East Trail. Clara returned. Locals were shaken. One man claimed the names matched families who had once lived nearby but left suddenly, never saying why. Some even recalled stories from their grandparents of folks who got too close to something and were never the same after. The oldest entry in the ledger listed no name, only a date from 1892 and the phrase, "He came in from the snow." Didn't speak. Beneath it, the handwriting grew more erratic. Keeps watching. Doesn't eat. Sleeps sitting up. And finally, one chilling line. "If I vanish, it's because I let him stay." There was no signature, just a final red X scrolled over the page. Search parties scoured the woods, but no other trace was ever found. And the cabin? It collapsed completely during a storm later that year, as if it had finally exhaled the last of its secrets. In the winter of 1936, a freak blizzard swallowed Copper Hollow, a tiny mining village tucked high in the Blue Ridge. Newspapers said it was one of the worst storms in Appalachian history, but the headlines left something out. Copper Hollow didn't just vanish under snow. It vanished, period. 47 residents lived in the village. After the thaw, only 2 were found. One was a child wandering alone near the Valley Creek, unable to speak. The other was a man, frozen solid beside the town well, hands raw and bloody like he'd tried to claw his way out of something. No footprints, no collapse. The home stood untouched, just empty. By spring, state investigators arrived, but even finding the town proved difficult. Topographic maps showed Copper Hollow had never existed. No postal code, no mining company records. But they found the buildings, shacks, a general store, a schoolhouse still with lesson plans on the board. Inside the church, a fire had burned in the hearth. But there were no names left to ask, no bodies to bury, and no clues that made sense. The child, eventually adopted by an out-of-state family, never recovered his voice. His last drawing, however, showed a village beneath jagged peaks and a black shape hovering above it. Something between wings and smoke. Locals still speak of Copper Hollow in whispers, if at all. Some say the storm wasn't just weather, that the people vanished because they saw something or let something out. An old prospector, passing through a year later, claimed to have seen lights moving in a synchronized pattern above the hollow, hours before sunrise. Others believe the mine opened something it shouldn't have, some kind of cave or pit sealed long before anyone settled the ridge. But the official report remains unchanged. No survivors, cause unknown. What's left is silence, slowly retaken by forest, and a village that wasn't supposed to be there in the first place. Just when the mountains seemed finished whispering their secrets, another name surfaces, faint as a snow print, but just as haunting. Tucked beyond the map trails, in a near-forgotten hollow of western North Carolina, lay a place locals called Echo Ridge. It wasn't marked by a town sign or a welcome post, just a crooked path, a frost-covered slope, and an old cabin with rusted mail hooks swaying in the wind. In the winter of 1948, Echo Ridge was barely more than a memory. Just a few weathered cabins and a single-room post office, run by Elijah Mathix, a man said to have never once left the mountain. For 50 years, he sorted letters by lantern glow, hand-delivering each one by sled in winter, boot in summer. People joked that he knew more secrets than any sheriff because he read every name, especially the ones no longer living. But one February morning, the stove inside the post office sat cold. The door stood open to the snow, and Elijah was gone. His sled remained, untouched. A fresh stack of sorted mail sat on the counter, every envelope in place, except one bundle. It was older, cracked, yellowing, each addressed to families no one in town had seen since the 1920s. Families who'd either moved or vanished. When the townsfolk finally dared to look through Elijah's worn ledger, they found only one final entry, written in the same careful ink as always, delivered to those still listening. No tracks led away from the cabin, only footprints that circled it, then stopped, mid-stride, as if the mountain itself had taken him. To this day, Echo Ridge remains abandoned, but hikers speak of faint metal clinks echoing through the woods, like mail hooks swaying with invisible letters. Some even claim that if you leave a note beneath a certain birch at the trail's end, it's gone by morning. And every now and then, Someone receives a letter in town. No stamp, no return address, just their name, and a line of handwriting that looks decades old. The letters in Echo Ridge stopped long ago, but the silence never did. And it's that same silence we followed, winding through wideouts and winter graves, where each name lost was a memory buried too deep to thaw. These weren't just cold cases. They were stories left without endings, scattered across a mountain range that forgets nothing. In Appalachia, justice doesn't always come in uniforms or headlines. Sometimes it walks alone. Sometimes it vanishes without a sound. And when the snows fall thick enough, even the truth can be erased with one storm. So which story stayed with you? Was it the girl who returned without words? Or the town where no footprints ever led out of the snow? These trails weren't built for closure. They were shaped by time, by weather, by grief. And somewhere, past the frostbitten mailboxes, the leaning cabins, and the ridgelines where the wind still speaks in whispers, those stories are still waiting, not solved, not forgotten, just waiting. Would you follow them? Because in these mountains, some ghosts don't haunt, they watch, and some trails were never meant to lead you back.